Welcome to the Going Somewhere podcast, a podcast for anyone who finds themselves in the ambiguous adventure of young adulthood, a season marked by uncertainty, change, love, heartbreak, and a whole lot of big decisions. Sit down with me for some real and raw conversations with some incredible people as we dig into what it looks like to be a follower of Jesus in this beautiful yet complicated season of life. If this podcast helps you in any way, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with friends. Be sure to join the conversation on Instagram by following goingsomewhere.podcast. We're all going somewhere. We might as well go there together. Let's dive into today's episode. Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the Going Somewhere podcast. I'm Steven, I'm the host of this podcast, and if you're new here, I just want to give you a special shout out. I'm glad that you're listening. If this is your first episode, hey, you've got about 40 to go back on, so I got something for your next road trip, but I just love the Going Somewhere podcast family. Really, the heart of this podcast is to come into the listening space of the young adult in your 20s, 30s, and maybe even beyond, and just really have some conversations with people that have walked through it and that are in a space that'll help you just really process this season of your life. It's ambiguous. There's lots of twists and turns, but like I said, I am so glad that you're here, that you're listening to this episode. Today, we've got Jason VanRuler. He's a licensed therapist, and his new book, Get Past Your Past, is so good. I really encourage you to pick it up. And I'm not just saying that because, I'm interviewing him on the podcast. Like, I've been reading it and it is really helpful. And so I'm excited for you to listen to this week's episode of the podcast. As always, make sure if you like it, if there's something about it that stuck out to you, share it with a friend, share it on social media. I'm really encouraged as more people that aren't in my circle of friends that are hearing about the podcast. And it's one of the greatest blessings when somebody I don't know reaches out and talks about how the podcast is blessing them. So make sure you share with somebody, let somebody know about the podcast. You can leave a rating, review, do all that fun stuff. And make sure you follow us on Instagram at goingsomewhere.podcast. But without further ado, let's take you into this week's episode with Jason VanRuler. Hey everybody, welcome to this week's episode of the Going Somewhere podcast. Today I am joined by Jason VanRuler. How are you doing, Jason?
I am doing fantastic. I am excited to be talking with you today. This is great.
Hey, I am pumped. You are clinician. You're in the therapy space and the counseling, coaching space, but now you're an author. You just came out with a new book, Get Past Your Past. We're going to be talking about that a little bit today. But do you mind just kind of sharing a little bit more about yourself, where you're at, who you're doing life with, all that stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I'm professionally, I'm a therapist. I also work as a coach, and I do a lot of work with people on retreats and kind of intensive experiences. So some of my specialties are working with people who have had trauma in their background and people who want to have better relationships. And goodness anymore, that's kind of all of us, right? We all want to have better relationships, and we all kind of look at our past and say, what do I do about that? And so professionally, that's kind of how I show up. I'm also a husband, been married for 16 years, and I've got 3 kids. And so I'm a father too, and a faith person. And so that's really important to me. And so I'm kind of all those things. And then I decided I'll be an author too. Why not throw that in the mix? And so I'm giving that a shot. Yeah.
That's awesome. I was actually reading your bio, and I also saw fly fishing, which is pretty fun. So do you do a lot of fly fishing?
I try to. Yeah. Okay. I mean, every year it kind of depends, but I really try to. It's interesting. I'm not like a big fish eater, so it's not really like, I'm going to do this and live off it. I actually frustrate a lot of people because it's all catch and release, but to me, there's just something really beautiful about taking time to be in nature.
Yeah.
And with fly fishing, it's an active thing. And so I just love to be out there, but I know some people hear that and they go, not me. I don't want that, Jason.
Hey, I'm up in, North Dakota, and hunting, fishing is kind of the way that people not survive, not as in like we eat it still. Like we're not still, hunters and gatherers, but a lot of hunters and fishermen up here. It's it's therapy in and of itself when we deal with the climate that we have
Oh,
here.
it
So
is. Yeah, those 2 days a year that we have that are good. It's great to be out. Yeah, I love it.
because where are you located?
Yeah, so we're South Dakota. So I'm real close to you. So yeah,
Yes.
we enjoy similar climate.
I've been interviewing people from San Diego and all these places, and it's nice to have somebody from the north. So I appreciate that. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's
Well,
good to have you. And we represent different Dakotas, but we can still be friends. We can still make this work.
most people in the world think we're from the exact same place.
It's true.
It's just
It's true.
one.
Everybody's like, I think it's all one. I think it's
I
all one. I'm like, I don't need to correct you. It can be one if you want it to be.
Yeah, whatever. I lived on the East Coast, and that was always, it was my accent, the dead giveaway. And then they would be like, "Where are you from?" And I would tell people literally think that we still have horse and buggy and live off the land, and so it's a tough place to be from. So you get me. I
Yeah, I
appreciate
totally get it. Yep, absolutely.
that. Oh man. Well, hey, how did you get into just the emotional health space, the therapy space? Um, I don't think there's many like 5-year-olds that when you ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? They're like, I want to be a therapist, but what kind of led you down this path?
Now I'm going to tell you something that's actually going to be surprising, but I actually always did want to do this. I
Wow.
literally, so since being a kid, and I don't have it at my desk, but since being a kid, I've always journaled and written, and literally I have a journal from when I was a kid where I wrote, and I said I want to be a psychologist, so kind of in a similar vein, but I said my goals are in life to be a psychologist, to be a dad, to have an office of my own, and kind of do all the stuff. And it took me a while to get there, but I kind of made good on it. So I think that was always my goal from the start. And then what happened, like what happens a lot, is as a young child, I wanted that, and then life occurred, and that seemed impossible for the longest time. So for the longest time, I was just busy doing everything else. And so it took a while to find myself again. And the journey to become a therapist was really about wanting to help other people. And also, I tell people it was a selfish pursuit because I wanted to get better. There was a part of me that said, if I get to be a husband and a father, I don't want to blow it. Like, I want to take it seriously. So how do I do work to do well at that? And in the process, became a therapist.
Wow. That's actually incredible. So I apologize for saying that you probably didn't want to be this from a young age, but no, that's really special though too. And I know you share in your book just a little bit about your story, or a lot about your story, and some of just the areas of brokenness that you've had to overcome, and childhood trauma and some of those things. And so kind of what role did counseling and therapy play in kind of your healing process and your kind of getting better process?
Yeah, well, it played a huge role. I mean, I think for me, and really for a lot of people I work with, we don't know what we don't know. And what I mean by that is however you grow up is normal to you because it's how you grew up. And so therapy is helpful in the sense that sometimes we learn things that aren't really healthy. And therapy
Yeah.
is helpful in saying, well, I don't know about that. Does that still work for you today? And so I think for me, I kind of, I read this training manual as a kid about how life's going to work. And therapy allowed me to kind of share the manual with someone and say, hey, is this accurate? And they're like, I don't know. Some of that's not bad, but like some of it is not really very helpful to you. And so for me, it was really the catalyst to change because I didn't know there were other ways to do it. And I think for a lot of people, therapy is that for them, which is just simply to say, there might be another way to do this.
Yeah, no, that's so good. And I think, young adults who are listening, a lot of college students, people in their early 20s, 30s, this is a big topic right now, mental health and emotional health. And I think some people can look at this topic and say, well, I don't have a story of like abuse or the real childhood trauma. But in your book, you talk a lot about how brokenness appears different in different forms, and we all have a level of brokenness. And you've talked about how you've worked with people coming out of prison, and you've worked with wealthy business people. And so can you just talk to that a little bit, just about how this isn't just a severe thing, that it has all these warning signs, but what are the warning signs for just everyday people that we can say, hey, I want to look at the brokenness in my own life?
Yeah, that's a great question because I think it speaks to some of the concern people have. when we talk about therapies, they say, I came from a good childhood, Jason. And so I don't know, is this about hating my parents, or what are you trying to get me to do here? And of course, I'm always like, yeah, it's totally about blaming your parents. I'm just kidding with you. It's not about that at all. What it's about is it's just about saying, what did I get that has really helped me? And what did I get that might not be so helpful today? And the reason that that's important is because we act that out. And so if we don't know it, we unintentionally continue these habits that might not be helpful. And so the goal really is not to throw your parents under the bus or do anything like that, but just to identify, like, what were the strengths and what were the weaknesses and what do I do about that? And I have to tell you, like, there are always strengths and weaknesses. Now, some are much bigger than others, right? But that doesn't mean they're not there. And so I just encourage people, check into that, because there's always going to be something. It doesn't have to mean you're in therapy for the rest of your life, but there are things that are working and not working for you. And if you notice you have kind of the same problem over and over again, or the same pattern of behavior, those are maybe good places to start.
And yeah, and you do a lot of work with relationships. And I've found that different relationships kind of reveal different things, whether it's a dating relationship and you realize how invested you get really, really early into a relationship before they even know that you like them, or, like there's so many things that different relationships kind of spark different things. So can you just kind of speak to that, and just like how kind of we can look at our situations and our relationships and say, all right, how does God want to reveal some things to me through this and in this season?
Yeah. And I think about that, I mean, even our relationship with God is really fundamental in how we view other relationships. So I think we look at those relationships with our caregivers or our parents, we look at it with God, and then we look at our relationship with ourselves, right? So how are those three relationships working? And then what do I know about them? What do I need to know about them? But to your point, we learn by being in a relationship with others. I mean, that's that community we need, is that I don't know it unless I'm learning from somebody else. And so relationships, in both wonderful and painful ways, teach us about the places we need to grow, as well as some of the places we're strong at.
So good. And, in your book, you talk about naming your brokenness. Can you just kind of explain just the importance of really kind of owning where you are and naming the areas of brokenness in your own life?
Yeah, I mean, it's really hard to do. And I'm just going to put out there, hard for me too. So I'm a little bit hypocritical in the sense that I'm going to tell you what to do, but I don't always do it myself. I do my best, but I don't always do it myself. But I think we can't really work on what we need to work on if we're not honest about the problem. And so if you would imagine you go to the doctor and you've had a stomach ache for the last month, but you recently got a cut on your finger, and you opt to tell the doctor about the cut on your finger and not the stomach ache, do you get the help you need? Probably not, right? Probably not.
Right.
The help you need is to tell the truth. I've got a really bad stomach ache. And so what I see people do sometimes is they try to pick what they think is the best problem to have, right? So maybe what they're really wrestling with is the stomach ache, but the better problem to talk about is the cut on your finger. And while I get that, and I understand why, it prevents us from really getting what we need. And that's ultimately what I want to help people do, is get what they need to get better.
That's so good. And, the title of your book is Get Past Your Past. So it talks a lot about that. And one of the things I loved, it was early in the book, it talked about how our past can be a springboard into a wonderful life, or it can be a shackle, that chains us back. So what kind of separates that? Like, how do we look at our past and use it as a springboard versus something that holds us back?
Yeah, I think we have to understand what it is and what it's taught us. And when we know that, for better or for worse, I mean, there's room for both. But when we know that it can be a springboard because it's the start of a journey, when we don't know that and we avoid it, it just becomes something we have to carry around. And the carrying around gets really exhausting.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I think so. I went through, just a couple of years ago now, decided to see a counselor, just some stuff that was going on like in the present, not really going into it thinking like, all right, I just really need to dive into some things that I had been carrying for a long time. And it was in that process of kind of saying like, this is what's going on in my life, that like you said, it wasn't about look at your parents and other people and blame them for everything, but it revealed some things that weren't just new problems that I was seeing in my marriage or new problems that I was seeing with living across the country from our support system. It was some deeply embedded things that kind of took the, I felt like I had two choices. Like I could pick up the rock and face it or not. And I think that's something that a lot of people, including myself, struggle with, is that it's easier to keep moving forward because it's going to be a lot of work. Can you talk about just the necessity of that work and how to kind of overcome that initial fear of like, I need help? And whether that's with a professional therapist or just a friend, I need help.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if I could, that was just what you shared there was just beautiful. I mean, that is, I think that is the process. I mean, in essence, that is what happens. And we think these problems are like brand new problems, but it's kind of like on Scooby-Doo where they take the mask off of the villain. It's always the same one. And you're like, oh, okay, it's the same one from before. So
Mr. Jenkins or whatever his name is.
It's always, by the way, it is always Mr. Jenkins. So I think the thing is like, we have that decision. Like you said, do we look at it? Do we run from it? I think the thing is that if you choose not to deal with it, you can pretty much bank on always having the same life you have today. And if that's okay with you, so be it. Right? If you are in a position where you are saying everything is wonderful, I don't need to do anything, then by all means keep moving. But if there is a part of you that says, I don't feel seen, I don't feel heard, I don't feel connected, I don't feel loved, we need to do the work. And the work is challenging for sure, but it's a long-term play. And for whatever it's worth, I think everybody's worth that investment.
Wow, that's so good. One of the quotes from your book, I'm going to read it. I have it right here. It says, getting past your past is less like having a root canal and more like brushing your teeth. You have to get good at dealing with the daily gunk. And I think that just speaks to what you just said. Like, this is a long-term play. And I think so many times, with a lot of things in our life, we think I can just hit that easy button, the Staples, I'm a 90s kid. I grew up with the Staples button,
Yep.
the easy button from Staples, but that isn't what this is. And so can you talk about that analogy? I love that. Not a root canal, it's brushing your teeth every day.
Yeah, because it is. And there will be things every day. And some days will no doubt be more difficult than others. But it's necessary. And the reason is because if we don't do it, we build up that residue, and that residue eventually becomes really hard to deal with. And it becomes solidified. And so oftentimes when I first talk to somebody, they've not dealt with it for so long that it really takes some effort. And so that's, I think, the part where people really, struggle is that initial effort is going to be tough. But if you continue to do it and you get good at it, like, that's a daily thing, not a once in a lifetime thing.
Wow. And I think that comes with a lot of proactive habits too. And so, I think there's that level of, hey, I've got a big problem in front of me. I've got this big area of brokenness or whatever it is that I need help with. And then there's the other idea of just the long game, the emotional health. Like, I want to be an emotionally healthy adult. I want to be an emotionally healthy parent, husband, pastor, grandparent someday. And so what are some of those habits that you encourage people to build now, to build today?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because I think it's about our legacy, right? What is the legacy that I'm trying to build? Whether I'm 30 or I'm 70, what is my legacy? And then how do I get there? And I think one of the things that I tell people to start is just to be honest. And I know that might sound kind of ridiculous, but we aren't always honest with ourselves. And that lack of honesty with ourselves creates big problems because it's really hard for us to show up authentically and to be vulnerable if we're not honest about where we're at. And so one of the first gifts that we can give ourselves, just to be honest. And I tell people, if you're a faith person, like, you can always do that with God. And the good news is you're not going to be rejected for that. So if you want like the safest spot to practice, start there and just tell the truth and work from that point.
Wow, that's so good. The truth is, I think like even relationships, honesty is obviously something you want in a relationship. But I think sometimes we simplify it down to like, well, I didn't lie. I'm not cheating. I'm not being dishonest in that way. but I think we can withhold honesty a lot of times in relationships, and that can harm as well. And so what's kind of the value in being honest and vulnerable in a relationship?
Yeah, well, I think it allows somebody else to really see us and meet us where we're at. Otherwise, it's very, very challenging. And so that's not even a bad thing. I mean, but I think sometimes we really struggle to show up honestly, even about what we need or what we like or who we are or how we feel. And we mute ourselves. And so the problem is sometimes we don't even get to be loved for this brilliant light that we are. We end up being loved for this version of ourselves we sell somebody, when the people who love us best, like they just want us. The people who really love us, they're not like, oh, I need you to be something. They just want you to be you. And so if we're not careful and we're not honest, we complicate a very simple and beautiful thing.
Wow. I'm thinking of even just like my relationship with my parents. So like I grew up in a very loving, supportive home. I never had to doubt, like, do my parents love me? Do my parents believe in me? But as any household, as any home, like there are things that you take on, some weights that you carry. And I think part of my process was just realizing, like, man, there's some conversations that I don't have to have because things are okay. Like I love my parents. They know I love them. Like they love my kids, their great grandparents. But I think I want to have, because at the end of the day, like I want to be able to have as healthy as possible relationship. But I remember the first time, like I was home and I brought up some things that I felt like I needed to share and just kind of talk about and bring out to the open. And it was hard. It was painful. I, in the moment, was like, I wish I wouldn't have done this. It feels like it's making it worse, but I can attest that it's made it better. And so just kind of what's on the other side and what you've seen working with people of some of those maybe hard initial conversations, or those hard conversations that you don't have to have, but it's so much better when you do have them.
Yeah, I love that question. And I love your willingness to just jump in and say, well, I'm going to talk to him. And even in the midst of kind of, oh, I might regret this, but to go there. And I think it's learning to swim the deep end of the pool. And the deep end's there for a reason, because that's the relationship we all really want, whether it's with our parents or our spouse or our kids or with God. Even we want that deeper relationship. But you don't get that deeper relationship only having the conversations you have to have. That's just not how that works. And so it really is an invitation to a deeper relationship, and that's the cost of entry.
Yeah, it can be a heavy cost, but I've just found that it's so worth it. When there's no secrets. I feel like I just hear story after story as a pastor, especially of people that lose somebody that they love. And one of the most difficult prospects or parts of that is that there was things that they wish they would have told them, or things that they wish they would have asked them about, or forgiveness they wish they would have given, or whatever the case is. And that's a really heavy weight that they can't deal with the same way anymore. And I think that was kind of like a wake up call for me, honestly, was just like, my parents are healthy, they're whole, they have energy to be with the grandkids, like all the things that you are so grateful to have. Yet I was like, but I think right now, if something were to suddenly happen, I think there'd be some things that I'm really clinging to, and things that I wish I would have faced. And so, I think, listener, I think that's just a invitation of, man, what are those relationships that you feel like, hey, it's okay, but I'm in the shallow end, or I'm in the middle of the pool hanging onto that little buoy thing, the little buoys in the middle.
Yeah, exactly.
But just the encouragement, like, hey, if this is the conversation you need to go forward and to jump in, do it. Something else you say in the book, Jason, that I really was kind of like digging into and just kind of holding on to, is you said to wrestle with our past is to wrestle with control, feeling like we've lost it, given it up, or never had it to begin with. Can you just talk about that idea of control and how going with our past kind of dives into that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of times that's really the problem that we have is a lack of control, or someone else controlling it, and feeling helpless. And so it is this kind of wrestling match with who's in charge, who's in control. And then I think from a faith perspective, we throw God in there. How does that all work? And so one of the first things we have to do is kind of right the ship and get our head on straight about, like, what are we doing with this? And where is that control piece at? And what do I need to control? Do I need to control anything here? Or can I just let it be what it is? And I think that's the tough thing, is if we don't deal with it, it often seems like a lot of work because we have to control everything moving forward. Whereas if we deal with it, we don't have to control things so much because it can just be what it was.
Man, I think, I'm just thinking even growing up, like the remote control, my dad had the grip on that thing. Like I'm laughing now because I'm a parent of three young kids at 5, 3, and 1. And, every once in a while, my daughter will have the control. And I'm just like, I can't handle any more Coco Melon or Bluey or whatever the case is. And I'm like, I get why my dad always had the control. He wasn't going to let us watch something, annoying. But I think he did. And now I'm learning. I'm like, nope, that's mine. But I think that is a hard reality, is giving up control, or like you said, on the flip side of that is not having it in the first place. What's kind of your advice to somebody, both that is like, I feel like I don't have control of my life, whether that's somebody, a relationship, or just in general, and then that person that says, I'm struggling to give up control. Like I feel like I've got all my plans, my everything in place, yet I'm still broken.
Yeah, I think where is the middle, right? So where am I at on the spectrum, and where is the middle, and what is one step towards the middle? Because really in life, most of our satisfaction, our happiness and contentment is going to come from living kind of in balance with those things. And so if I'm on one end or the other, so be it. But how do I take one step closer to the middle? And I'll know when I've taken enough steps, but what is that one next step? Well, maybe one day a week I give up the remote control. Right. Maybe that's my one step, and that's the place I can live. But we just decide what that one step is, and then how do I take that?
So good. And it boils it down. It's one step, one step, not 100 steps.
Yeah, because otherwise it's overwhelming. And let's say you're a person who comes into this and they say, well, I've never had control, Jason. I just have never had that. That's overwhelming. And so I would say, okay, maybe you haven't. Can you have some control in your thoughts? Can you have some control over your actions and behavior? Let's start there. And making it small gives us the ability to build on something instead of immediately feeling like we failed if we aim too high.
Wow. One of the things that, I've kind of had in kind of my toolbox for a long time is an envisioned future. I've kind of a practice of looking ahead 5 years, 10 years, and kind of, I journal from that perspective of like what life is like. But I've also found that sometimes when that doesn't happen or whatever, like if I don't have a plan, that it can be really kind of like disappointing. And so how do you kind of deal with that balance of, all right, here's the picture of healing, here's the picture of wholeness, and then the gap that kind of lives in between?
Yeah, I think you have to learn to live in the in between. Otherwise, it's a long road. If we're only outcome based, then that basically guarantees that we're only happy with the outcome and not before that. And so the challenge is, I think, just to point yourself in the right direction and then start walking. And I think about even, there's biblical examples and all these other things where maybe we didn't know the exact plan, but we knew the direction. And so I think the direction's enough, and learn to celebrate along the way. Because if we're not doing that, it kind of takes any reason to grow out of the equation, right? So it's like, well, I'm going to be miserable until I reach exactly the place I want to be. Okay, well, how's that going to work? There's not a lot of incentive. So what I'm always talking with people about is, are you pointed in the right direction? Because if you are, let's start there.
I love that. The direction is enough. And, funny enough, like the whole idea of the Going Somewhere podcast, the name of it was kind of stemming from my own kind of journey of feeling like I was going to be in one place kind of forever. And then God kind of revealing, hey, I think I have something different for you. And I didn't feel like the future was laid out in this perfect map of like, this is what's going to happen. It really did feel like, Abraham, go to the place that I will show you. And I think that's kind of been my own personal, it's like, I'm going somewhere. But I want to be aiming in that right direction. So that's so helpful. That's so good. You talk as well in your book, and you're just so vulnerable about your story, which I just appreciate. I think you had your kind of initial, like, there's a lot of brokenness that I'm dealing with. And then you talk about your wife, and your guys' struggles to have kids, and an adoption that fell through, and that hits close to home. I had my brother had a similar situation, and just the, even as an uncle, like that pain, but for them, I just know I can't even describe it. So how are some of those things? Maybe people haven't walked through that and they're like, hey, I'm healthy now. I'm healthy. I'm in a good place. I'm solid. And then those things that we can't predict come up in life. How did you guys walk through that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was really challenging for me because I kind of subscribe to this: if I do the right thing, I'll get the right result. And so for a little while, I'd been engaged and getting better and doing all the right stuff and checking the boxes, and then that happened, and it was like, well, wait a second, if you do the right thing, like, this should all work out. So now what? And I think initially I was really angry about that. And that is in some ways the control piece, right? Because I kind of felt like I was controlling the situation. If I did the right stuff, I get the right result. And so I think initially I just had to kind of embrace the fact that some of this stuff isn't up to me. And sometimes it's not about if you did or didn't do the right thing and the outcome. It's just about how it was, and what you do with that. And so for me, that actually was a real invitation to get even closer to God. And something that I really hadn't done before is to lean into God during grief. Didn't want to do it, still don't want to do it, right? That's nothing I would volunteer for. But I think in that place, my anger turned to sadness that I could share with God about the dream I had. And in doing that, I think there was healing, and there was clarity about how to best move forward.
Wow, that's powerful. As we kind of come to an end here, just with young adults in mind, and that those 20s, 30s, young professional years, getting married, having kids, some of that, just what would you speak into them? Like, if you were sitting across from them, obviously everybody's story is different, but just how would you kind of encourage them in this season to take advantage of the 20s, of the 30s, to really build a life of emotional health?
Yeah, I mean, I think, if I had a time machine, I do a lot of things differently, right? I'd probably play the lottery. I do some stuff different, but I think, in our youth, it's kind of how they talk about investing. And if you invest in your youth over time, you do okay financially because the investment just builds. And I think our emotional life is really the same. Our life is really going to be defined by the relationships we have. And again, that's relationships with self, with others, with God. And so having the ability to have deep, meaningful relationships will literally set you up for a life of happiness and joy. There'll be hard times, but that is probably the best investment you can give yourself and your family. And so I would just tell people, it doesn't mean you always have to work and it's going to be this really painful thing every day. But the sooner that you can kind of have an idea about who you are, where you came from, and where you're going, the better your life is going to be.
For the person that's saying, like, man, right now I'm struggling with that. I've got shallow friendships or shallow relationships with friends or family. What are kind of the first steps that you would encourage them to take?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a lonely place to be, right? So it's, you're maybe hearing this and you think, well, sure, Jason, you make it sound easy because you're on the other end of it. And just, full transparency, when I kind of started my journey, I had no clue. I might have listened to a podcast like this and thought, oh, man, it's just some other guy telling me about how it's supposed to work. So I get it. I think the first thing is just, if I'm struggling, who can I tell that cares? And maybe there's no one. Maybe you hear that and you say, well, there's nobody that can meet me there. And then I just say, well, I think God can. So maybe we just start there. But who can I tell the truth to that cares, and how can we build on that? And you will probably be able to identify at least one person that you can do that with. And if you continue to do that, eventually you will get in front of the right people who can help you out.
Wow. If that's you listening today, think of that person. Really take, I love to reflect. And I think after these episodes, it's so important for us to just kind of sit and go, okay, I listened to something for 30 minutes. What was the takeaway? What can I do? And I think that might be a great action step, is like, who is that person I can talk to? Who is that person I can go there with? That's so good. But one of the questions I ask every guest, and you kind of inched into it a little bit, but if you were to be able to go in that time machine and stand in front of like 20-year-old Jason, what advice would you give him?
Yeah, I think I would say definitely use facial moisturizer because later you will thank me, Jason. You will have less wrinkles, so use the moisturizer.
That might be the best. That might be one of the best ones we've had. That's good. That's good.
Yeah, so use moisturizer. But maybe on a more meaningful note, I think the thing that I wish I would have known was that I could just be myself and be loved, and that that was going to be for some people and not for others, but that was okay. Because I think I spent just a lot of time trying to be something I really wasn't. And that's just sort of a bummer for everybody involved. And so I think if I could go back, I'd say be yourself and do the work. And if you do those things, like, you're just going to be fine.
So good. Hey, thanks so much, Jason. This has been so helpful. And, I really want everybody listening, make sure you get your hands on Jason's book, Get Past Your Past. Where can people find your book? Where can people find you and keep up with all the things you're doing? Also, I just want to give you a shout out. Your Instagram is phenomenal. Just practical, just the reels, everything about it is just so helpful. So I just appreciate you doing the work, obviously behind closed doors, but out in the public to really help a lot of people. So how can we find your book? How can we keep up with what's going on in your life?
Yeah, well, thank you for that. Book can be found any major retailer, so Amazon, Target, Barnes & Noble, all those places. And then on Instagram, it's jason.vanruler, and really all the other socials too. And the goal with that, if you go search it out, is just to give you practical daily things that you can kind of practice in your life and your relationships to help you get through that journey and get to the place you want to be.
Awesome. Well, we'll have all that linked in the bio. Make sure you check it out. The daily stuff, like I said, is so helpful. So I appreciate you, Jason. Thanks for coming on. Good luck with the book and good luck with everything going on in your life. Appreciate you a ton.
Thank you so much. I'm grateful for this time. Appreciate it.